Welcome to Practically Christian. I'm Janelle, and I'm here with my husband Luke.
Hey, everyone.
And our friend Jake.
Hey.
We share conversations that help you know Jesus more deeply and follow him more faithfully. The truth is, no one's arrived at Christ-likeness, and to grow in that direction, we believe you need authentic relationships and biblical theology applied to your everyday life. We hope you're encouraged to grow and to live out the biblical truths that we discuss on this episode. So let's get practical and dive into a conversation about tattoos. Can a Christian get a tattoo?
Well, we are almost finishing up at our church a series called Can a Christian ...
When this comes out, it will be finished.
Yeah, it will have been finished for a few weeks. And so this is actually like sort of an addendum to that series, because what we did to focus those messages is we gave out surveys to people in our different connection groups. That's what we call our small groups. And just asking what topics they wanted us to explore. So in that series for our church, we talked about can a Christian get an abortion or IVF? Can a Christian be gay or trans? Can a Christian explore other religions? At the time of this recording, that's one we're going to do this coming Sunday for our last one. And
our first one was Luke's favorite, by which
yes.
I mean the one that he wanted to do the least, which was can a Christian drink, get drunk, or smoke weed?
Yeah, consume cannabis. Because not just smoking. There's other ways to consume cannabis. Anyways, so first of all, before we jump into the framework we've been using, it's sort of a weird question, but what has been your favorite week so far of this series? I'm just looking for some praise.
Yeah, so far there's actually been I don't know why, but for all three of them, I've been kind of nervous. Partly because I know what I would say and I want Luke to agree with me, but also because when Luke talked about homosexuality, I knew of people who have struggled with that or who currently are, that are either in our church or kind of like related to our church. And I know people who have had abortions or IVF that are in our church or kind of like related to our church. And I know that there's kind of always that Baptist disagreement about if you can drink or not. And so every time I go in, I'm always just a little bit like nervous about how it's going to go. I think my favorite one was IVF because there was some questions that got bandied about and asked about that I think aren't your normal, I guess, pro-life abortion debate questions, but kind of like a little bit unique of like, have we thought about this from this direction? I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah, I'm going to answer based on small groups. I thought the conversation that I had in my small group about the drugs and alcohol was the most interesting because people have such diverse backgrounds with it. Some people have even more recent addictions after they, especially with, I think they call it just like pharmaceutical, like medications that became addictions. So yeah, I thought that was a more interesting and then almost everybody had either a relative or a friend who has addiction issues, and so I think, I thought the conversation about that and having open conversation about that was the most valuable of the ones that we've discussed so far.
Yeah. So we're not going to rehash any of that because our goal actually in this series is to pair with that and to talk about 3 of the top questions that didn't make it into that sermon series.
4 of the top questions.
Maybe. We'll see.
I'm arguing for it.
So our question for today is, can a Christian get a tattoo? Several people asked about that. And so we're going to jump into that topic. And the framework we're using both for this series and for these podcast episodes is to take into three questions, and they go in a certain order on purpose. So first of all, what does the Bible teach, either directly or indirectly, about this topic or issue or question? Then what is the wise thing for you to do in light of your history, personality, all of that? And then finally, how will this behavior or choice affect others, both Christians and non-Christians? So we're going to work through those questions with the topic of tattoos. And I just encourage you to consider those questions with any topic. And I'm kind of stealing and kind of changing that from James Emery White in his book, After I Believe. He talks a lot about, in his chapter on studying the Bible and trying to understand the Bible, he talks about some questions to ask and help you navigate tough questions. So, can a Christian get a tattoo? There is one direct Bible passage about this question. Would you like to read it, Janelle?
Sure. So if you want to look it up for yourself in your own translation, it's found in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 28. And it says, "You are not to make gashes on your bodies for the dead, or put tattoo marks on yourselves. I am the Lord."
Ooh, all right, there we go. Bible says it.
I believe it.
That settles it.
People are going to turn off the podcast right now.
Sorry. No, it is interesting. So this is in the Old Testament law, and it is a passage that says don't get tattoos. Now, this brings up a lot of topics like how do Christians approach the whole Old Testament law? Because if you have a shirt made of two different materials, you're actually breaking a different Old Testament law.
Yep, it's a small question. Or if you're eating a cheeseburger, according to some Jewish traditions, you're not supposed to mix the milk of an animal and the meat of an animal because it says don't boil a baby goat in its mom's milk.
Or if you ever eat bacon.
True.
Which I try to do every day if I can. Just kidding. Not every day. So it is a little more complicated. Now, it's not just that the whole law is abolished. That's also a false view. And shameless plug, we're going to do a series in our church this fall on the Christian and the law. And how do Christians read the Old Testament law and apply it and understand it as fulfilled through Christ. But the short answer is you do what you do when you read anything. You understand it in light of its original context. Like, what did it mean then before you apply it to now? And so even when you look closer at the passage itself, you realize that it doesn't just say plain and simple, don't tattoo yourselves. It's talking about practices on behalf of the dead, right? Let me read it again. This is a different translation, but it says, "Do not cut your bodies for the dead or put tattoo marks on yourselves. I am the Lord." So it's on behalf of the dead. And I just have a study Bible here, and it has a footnote and says, cut your bodies for the dead. This is another pagan mourning practice. So it's a way of mourning for the dead that was associated with other false religions around the Israelites. Tattooing actually included writing. So it could be permanent writing or even temporary writing for them. And the word in Hebrew. So it refers to writing or inscribing some kind of marks on your body. And then it says the context suggests that this is another pagan mourning practice of that day, or perhaps a mean of warding off the spirits of the dead. So I've done some research on this passage because I've been asked a lot about it a lot. And there's basically three options for what it could be referring to in the ancient Eastern culture context that it's written. It could be, warding off evil spirits for the dead, like this dead person could come back to haunt me. And so I'm going to secure myself against that possibility by marking myself in some way. Which, as a Christian, you say, you don't need to be scared of that happening.
Yeah, or like God is your protection.
And God is your protection, not whatever marks you put on your body, right? Another option is actually that this could be associated with Egyptian practices, right? Because the people are coming out of Egypt. And there was a sense where marking your body was a way of showing who owned you. And so it could be actually associated with ownership or slavery, and God saying, I am the Lord, I am your Lord. No one else owns you, except me, I come first. But regardless, especially with that association in the verse itself of don't do this on behalf of the dead, it's clear that there's some kind of pagan mourning practice being referenced, and that's saying don't do it because of that, not saying don't do it, period.
Do you think that has a reference to when people get tattoos to remember their dead relatives? That's
a great question. No? We're going to talk about that in a second. Yeah. So, in short, if you want to play it safe because you're not sure which of those interpretations to go with, you should not get a tattoo to worship the dead. You should not get a tattoo to ward off dead spirits. And you should not get a tattoo to communicate ownership or slavery of yourself to someone or something else. And so when I look at that, I'm like, that's not the reason most people get tattoos, except for that issue you brought up, Jake, which, again, we'll get to later. So, first question, what does the Bible teach directly? That's what it teaches directly on the question of tattoos.
Am I correct in saying that tattoos are not brought back up in the New Testament?
Correct. Now, there's one spot that some people point to is in the book of Revelation, when there's a prophecy of Jesus and he has his name written. But could just be written. It might not be tattooed on him. But people are like, oh, Jesus tatted up when he returns. That's what I've heard people say.
I guess you could probably say, some people will probably argue the mark of the beast is,
sure.
But that's not a direct teaching about tattoos.
And Christians have a mark too.
Yeah.
Right, so.
Yeah, okay. Just checking.
Yeah, good question. There is one indirect teaching, and that is in the New Testament, that's your body's a temple of the Lord. So some people will use that to argue against tattoos.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, that passage is about sexual promiscuity, though, so it would be a little bit of a stretch, it feels like. It
would be a stretch. Although I've heard people apply it to physical health, and working out, so if you could apply it there, then...
It would also maybe be a little bit of a stretch.
All right, so what does the Bible teach directly or indirectly? And in this case, we we do get some guidelines. Don't do it for these reasons, but not just a pure, don't do it at all. So that brings us to our second question is, what is the wise thing to do for you in light of your personality, history, family, and even culture? So let's just make those into questions instead of just direct teaching. What would you say are some healthy motivations for getting a tattoo and some unhealthy motivations for getting a tattoo? As far as what's the wise thing for you to do?
I would say I don't necessarily have healthy reasons, but I have neutral reasons.
Sure.
If that makes sense. So it's not oh, you're such a healthy person because you want this. But I think some people are just very artistic and they really enjoy images as part of how they enjoy life. And maybe they have a significant symbol or I've seen Christians use even a discussion thing that will get people talking, and they have a tattoo that kind of is an opportunity to witness is kind of how they do it, where they or it can just be an aesthetic choice, I like jewelry, or I like earrings that are dangly and have hearts, or whatever it is, where it's just an aesthetic choice for them, or maybe has a slightly deeper reason, this is a way that I can start conversations about Jesus in a non-confrontational, non-pushy way, because people ask about my tattoo and then I share about what it means to me in my Christian walk. Jake, just for the record, doesn't like tattoos.
Okay,
as a personal choice.
For the record, I don't really like tattoos, not because I think that no one should get them, but because I just don't get it.
You think no one should get them?
Yeah, I see people. This is what happens, and anyone who knows me knows this happens. I just say I don't like them, and people are like, Jake, why are you so extreme? And I'm like, I'm just saying I don't like them. But I don't even know what would make me get one. Anyways, so that said, I'm gonna say here a question that I ask people when they say they're gonna get a tattoo often is, what is the reason behind it? And specifically, are you trying to prove something? I think that I've seen this happen a lot, and one of the spaces that happens a lot in is with adopted kids. I've told quite a few people you shouldn't probably get your new family's last name tattooed on you, because to me that's feels very much like I need to prove that I'm actually a part of the family. Or I think people will get ones for their dead relatives and go, I need to prove how much
I cared about
that person. And so if you're, and I think also you can do it with crosses and stuff too. I think I need to prove that I'm all into Christ and that Christ owns me, or what. It's like, if you're trying to prove something with your tattoo, it's probably not healthy. And I think you're going to probably run into the same problem that a lot of people dealing with transgenderism run into, where they'll get some kind of beginning surgery, or they'll do something, or hormones that'll start working for a little bit, and then it'll just make things worse because they don't get the intended result.
So it might make you feel that way for a while, but after an extended time.
After a while, number one, it doesn't work anymore, and number two, it makes you feel worse because you go, oh, I got this tattoo to prove that I really loved my dead grandpa. And then one day you're like, oh, and you look and you're like, I haven't thought about my dead grandpa in 3 weeks. I'm such a terrible, maybe he didn't mean that much. It becomes like an indictment in some ways. I think the same thing can be said about last names, or even crosses that are made, that are there to prove something. It's like they can become like a charge against you. And so, all that said, you should ask yourself the question, are you trying to prove something with your tattoo? If the answer is yes, then you probably shouldn't get it.
Well, you jumped into my next question.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. The next question is, if a fellow Christian came to you and they were considering getting a tattoo and they trust you to help them weigh that decision, what questions would you ask them to help them clarify? So, are you trying to prove something? Is a good question to consider.
Or even maybe not even prove, but convince yourself of something. Is often.
Yeah, I think too. I would ask questions about kind of trying to do the big picture thing, because I think life feels very intense in different moments, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to mark that with a tattoo, but it could be. I think it could be fine. But I think sometimes, for instance, when is someone likely to get a tattoo of their grandfather's name? It's in that intense mourning period right after the death. Whereas we know our feelings aren't permanently intense on any topic. And so I just would want to zoom out and say, in 20 years, when your grandfather has been dead for 20 years and you've filled it with memories, do you still want this on your body? Is this going to be something that you want permanently, or is it something that you want right now? And I think it's a hard thing to think through, because obviously you don't know how you're going to feel about it 20 years from now. But I do think the zooming out can be helpful as a friend, just to bring that up for people. That makes me remember. So in college, the first year I was in college, I was in room 204, second floor, fourth room. And the people across the hall were in room 203. And they loved their roommates so much that summer they all got a tattoo of the number 203 on their forearm, really big. Wow. And some of my roommates were like, wow, we should get 204. I was like, no, I'm not gonna, no offense, I'm not tattooing, the room number that I was in my freshman year of college. And you know what? Good choice. You don't regret. Do you think that those guys regret, or no? I think that they were regretting it within a year. Because they didn't live with the same people the next year. Yeah. And I still knew some of them, and they I don't know, it wasn't as significant to them as they thought it was at the time.
Yeah, I think because I got as a contrast, I got different piercings when I was younger. After high school, before college started, I got a big ear piercing, and then a year later I got another bar, and I had a chin thing just for a very short amount of time.
Jake's just wow.
But
don't get me started on piercings.
I really liked this one, and then I actually closed it up because of a mission trip circumstance where I had to take it out because of what it communicated to that culture. But where I'm going is, I was okay doing that because I knew it wasn't permanent. It didn't feel I strongly considered getting a tattoo when I was in college. I kind of wanted to. I just didn't ever think of something that was meaningful enough and zoomed out level was going to be so important for my whole life that I really wanted. And And I do think I had enough maturity to think through those at different levels. Like, oh yeah, I could get a piercing. But I feel like in general, people tend to think of tattoos and piercings on the same level, and I don't think of them. So I guess my question and advice would be like, have you thought through how big of a decision this is? That like when you're 90 years old, this will still be there.
Well, I mean, they do have tattoo removal services now
Right.
that are expensive and painful apparently, but that's a possibility now. Maybe it wasn't always like if you were a sailor in the 1920s and you got a tattoo, I don't think you had very many options to take it off.
True.
Yeah, I think the other question I would ask, and I asked this question about piercings too, is, and I ask this question more often of girls because I think they have a tendency to fall into it more often, is like, do you think that this are you doing this change because you think it'll make you more desirable? And I think girls can do that with piercings. I think people can do that with tattoos. It's like, I think guys do it too, right? Like, well, this cool, like, Maori New Zealand tattoo make me look really cool to people, and so, like, they'll think I'm tough. Or, like, you know, like, so, or even, like, I think I have a friend or in Wisconsin who got a bunch of tattoos that were very artsy, and it was like, oh, he drew them all. It's like, oh, but I look back and I'm like, I think you might have just been trying to show off your art to kind of show your value because you didn't feel like people were valuing you enough for that skill.
I have a like devil's advocate for that because I do think that's true and that can happen.
Yeah.
But I'm also not totally against that rationale or motivation. What I mean is, like, we make decisions every day based off of beauty and appearance. Like, I'm wearing these clothes because I think they hide my side flub a little better than other shirts do, right? Like, and is that wrong? Should I not? Am I only wearing this because of? It's like, no, I have mixed motivations. Like, it's a good piece of clothing, but it is one of my motivations. And
yeah, I think it comes back to, are you coming at it from a healthy angle?
Okay.
You know, it's where it's like, and I think there is like this. As I said, I'm not against all tattoos, right? I think you can do stuff for artsy reasons, but I think if you're doing it to try to fill a hole or to become something that you're not, that's you're trying to, often people are trying to change either their own perception of themselves or others' perceptions of them through these things. And if your motivation is one of those things, probably not great.
Yeah.
That would be my...
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so kind of like maybe having a little bit of meditation on my value is not going to change if I change my hair or if I get a tattoo or if I get a piercing.
Yeah.
Or even if I dress in certain ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then also with wisdom, because the question is, if a fellow Christian was considering getting a tattoo and they came to you for advice, what questions would you ask them? I also think in light of what we looked at in Scripture, you should ask them...
Are you warding off evil spirits?
No, but I do know someone, actually, Jake, whose line is like, I would never get a tattoo in commemoration of a person's life.
Yep.
Because...
That's a little closer.
That's a little closer. Like, I don't think that's exactly what's going on. I think it's warding off that dead person's evil spirit or something.
Yeah, and I would say...
Peepaw's evil spirit, gotta ward that off.
I just think, like, so if, like, let's say you just really love some Marvel character and you get Captain America on your arm or something, and, like, you're able to do that, but you're not allowed to do your grandma's face or, I don't know, like, whatever. Like, I just am a little bit like, well,
Yeah,
it just seems weird to me that remembering somebody can't be a reason. But, yeah. Because a lot of it's like, I love this flower, bam, you know, or...
If someone was going to get a Marvel character, I'd tell them that was dumb and they shouldn't.
and even if you make that line, it's not so much the memorializing, it's the mourning.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's like what the...
Interesting.
So
maybe it'd be fine, like, after the mourning period and
maybe.
Interesting. Well, and that would allow you to get that a little bit of the bigger picture perspective, because I think it's like if you're in the midst of the heavy mourning versus later when you've kind of incorporated the understanding of their passing.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen a really good evangelistic tattoo? What I mean by evangelistic is like it opens doors to conversations about Jesus or like points to Jesus effectively.
Yeah, I knew a guy in Wisconsin, his name was Josh, and he had, well, number one, I think he had full sleeves and more. But one of them, it was like this, it was a full sleeve that had like a lot of things that were important to him, but on it was a lottery ticket. And the lottery ticket, I can't remember exactly what was going on with it, but I remember that it actually involved his story of coming to Christ. Was basically his story of coming to Christ was he was a drug dealer, and he had been a Christian when he was a kid. He was a drug dealer, and he had bought a lottery ticket with specific numbers, and the cops were raiding the house he was living in. And he escaped out the bottom, like, window well of the basement he was in with a giant bag of thousands of dollars of cocaine and buried it into the forest. It didn't get caught. And he was like, had this epiphany moment where he was like, what am I doing? And at that point he was like, I'm gonna bury this so I don't get caught, but I'm leaving it all behind. Like, for God. It was like this, I'm going in this new direction. Turns out he saw that those were the winning lottery ticket numbers that he had gotten, that was on the lottery ticket in the basement that he had abandoned in fleeing the police. And then he purposely made it so that he couldn't find this bag of cocaine. And so, anyways, all that said, it was kind of his conversion story. And so he has a tattoo of a giant lottery ticket. I forget if it's, I think it is the numbers, and then it has the date of what, and so it's like, that kind of leads into him telling his story of choosing Christ over these other things.
Wow.
Which I think is kind of a cool one.
Yeah, that's a crazy story. I just know the one that you were probably going to share.
I couldn't think of any, so I'm not going to share it.
Well, I don't remember where I heard this, but there was a guy who got just the Leviticus 19:28 tattooed on his arm.
Got it.
And people would be like, oh, what is that verse? And he's like, it's a verse that says, do not tattoo yourselves. And then he would have a conversation with them about how, the law and how Jesus fulfilled and how we are free in Christ, basically. But he would have this big conversation with them, but it was based off of their question, because they're like, what does that mean? And a lot of people who aren't exposed to the Bible, they don't even know it's a verse. They're like, Leviticus, what, what is this word, know? So for him, it was just a conversation starter.
Yeah. Are we going to ask the question, what's the worst tattoo you've ever seen?
It's not one of the questions.
Okay, I'm going to answer that anyways.
No.
So...
No, we're going through this faster.
No, so...
Maybe at the end.
Okay, at the end.
It'll be our silly question.
Okay, I will answer it later.
All right, let's hear it later.
All right, so we talked about what the Bible says. We've talked about wisdom, the kinds of questions you should consider. We should also say, honestly, none of us have tattoos, so we don't know what we're talking about.
You don't know if I don't have any tattoos.
Really your bad experience.
Luke hasn't seen my tramp stamp, which is a butterfly.
Luke doesn't know how to recover from that comment.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so none of us have tattoos.
Yes. But the last question is the effect on others. So we, both believers and non-believers. So I asked that question to set up, that it is true that tattoos can be an evangelistic tool. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people also view them as
part of their story,
or as an outward marker of I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, and that's core to my identity.
It's similar to how we would wear a wedding band and be like, I'm a married person.
Right. So the last question, in just considering that, is just the broad level, in what ways can a tattoo either positively or negatively impact your witness or your interactions with fellow Christians? So your witness to non-Christians and your interactions with fellow Christians.
I would say, so similar to Luke was mentioning how he had a piercing in his ear. It was a bar, and he went on a mission trip, and in that culture, piercings of any kind on men were associated with gang activity. And they didn't want the children attending the
Vacation
Christian Bible school or like the church thing to think, oh, this is like a gang. Like this really nice guy who's helping me is a gang member. Like they didn't want that association to happen for the children. And I think the pastor was very gracious and said, I know this is not what it means to you, but that's what it can mean to the students. So would you please remove it this week so that that's not a thing? But I think similarly, there are maybe potential cross-cultural experiences where people will associate
being
tattooed with gang membership or violence or that kind of thing. So I would say just be cognizant of that. I mean, I feel like there's no way to please every culture, right? You're in your own culture. But for me personally, if I ever were to get a tattoo, I would get it in a spot that could be covered. Because then you can just be sensitive in an environment like that. Like you were able to take your piercing out, but if it was a neck tattoo, you couldn't just take that off. I guess you could do some kind of cover. Turtlenecks in Mexico would be great. But yeah, I feel like cognizant of that as a potential cross-cultural experience.
Almost like if you're considering mission strongly or feeling a calling towards that,
you should be aware of how that might be interpreted.
In Eastern Europe, a lot of tattoos are only done in prison. And so it can end up being like if you get tattoos, it can really make people think that you were that you were not doing great things and that you're not like a trustworthy person because of that.
And I know culture's changing, but I also know, like, I don't think I would have been hired at Creekside had I had an obvious tattoo.
Yeah, so maybe just a wisdom question there of like people are going to judge your seriousness as an individual or something.
And that's changed. Like, if I was doing that over again today, I don't think it'd be an issue.
Yeah, and also I think
15 years ago,
it depends about like what tattoo, right? Like I think if I don't know, but like I feel like if you would have had a cross tattoo,
I don't think it would have mattered.
I like some churches it might not, and some churches it might. Versus like if you had like a yin yang symbol or like then that's.
Yeah, or I think too, it depends on, it doesn't necessarily mean like everywhere a church would feel this way. It's like maybe in Los Angeles it would be a benefit to have big tattoos or whatever in your hiring process. But
I heard, I was talking to a friend the other day who just got a tattoo recently, and it was just a small cross. And it was she was telling me this story. It was kind of funny because the guy who does the tattoos isn't a Christian, but apparently like crosses is like one of the most requested tattoos that he ends up doing. And so they were having a conversation. He was like, okay, I have something to tell you about your cross tattoo. She's like, okay. And he was like, you have two options. It can either look upside down to you or upside down to other people. Usually you want it to look upside down to you so that other people don't get the wrong idea. Because upside down crosses is like can be an occult symbol.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so it was like this funny like thing where it was like this guy had learned some things about Christianity, and I think they even like talked to him about Christianity a little bit during the tattooing process, and kind of like saw people's intent behind it as he was doing the tattoos, even though he wasn't a Christian.
That's really interesting.
But I just thought that was kind of a funny idea. It was like you cannot have it both ways.
I mean, unless you put it on a movable,
Yeah, well, like even like I think Zach has one like here, and I don't think he could possibly see it unless he was in a mirror.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless
and
it was
then
upside
it would be
down.
upright.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would just be like what someone else looking at it.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought it was kind of a funny like.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think increasingly so, at least in the culture we're all a part of, North American, U.S. culture, like, I don't think there's a strong danger for most tattoos to mess up your witness, I want to say.
Yeah.
I can't think of...
Yeah, unless they are explicit or whatever. Like
right,
those kinds
sure.
of-
Well, so here's a question, and we might not have enough time for this, but we talked about in the drinking sermon that you did about like, no, it's not a sin to drink, but one of the things is you probably shouldn't drink around people who think that drinking is sin. What if you're in a community, or even like as a Christian, is it irresponsible for you to get a cross tattoo if there is even 10% of Christians in America who think that you shouldn't get a tattoo because it's in the Bible?
So, actually, to clarify, with drinking, it's not that you should not drink around people who think drinking is a sin. that's not what it is. It's you
Okay.
shouldn't drink around people
Who are tempted to drink because you're
who
drinking.
will be tempted to drink because you're
and who
drinking.
shouldn't be drinking because of their personal
Gotcha, okay.
issues or
Yeah. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? So that's why it's different.
Okay.
So if showing off a tattoo
Made
would
someone,
make someone want to get a tattoo,
even though
who's
they,
against getting tattoos,
Okay.
that would be the
that's
deal.
probably unlikely. I think we're we're probably pretty
I
safe.
think we're pretty safe. Yeah.
I do think though, like if you are setting up a standard of beauty or whatever, and like someone can receive that incorrectly.
Yeah, if the standard of beauty is a cross on your face.
That can literally be anything. Like,
Yeah.
and I feel like we can't.
Like having dreads in your hair.
Having dreads can just really distract people from Jesus. No, just for people who are only listening, I have dreadlocks, and
Yeah.
you can go on YouTube and see our video if you want to see them in a break. Otherwise, people are gonna be like, "What are you guys talking about?" Yeah, I think it can be a conversation piece. I do think there are more issues related to respecting your elders that might come into the question.
Yeah.
Like imagine your parent is super anti, like, but you really, really want one.
Yeah.
It's like, and you're an adult, you're free to make your own choices, but will that impact your choice at all? Or maybe the placement of the tattoo, or I don't know, like it's something to consider because we're supposed to love people more than we just get what we want because we want it. So I think that's like a wisdom question, and I think it doesn't necessarily mean if your parent is against it you should never ever, and there's no way for you to ever have a tattoo, but it's also like, well, how important is it to you, and how will your parent feel? Or it could be a spouse could have a similar situation where what if I really wanted a tattoo and Luke didn't want me to have one? Like, that's a question. I mean, it's my body, my choice is how people would say it, but it's like, but really I should care about what Luke wants because I love him and we're married. So I think like these questions can have like more, I want to say, layers and relational impact and all these things, and that should be considered. Not that is necessarily dictating your choices. But.
Sure. And one thing just to throw in here before I forget, because I meant to talk about with the wisdom question, what's the wise thing for you to do, is just to know that there is, for whatever reason, there's an addictiveness to getting tattoos. So that's just been demonstrated that if you get a tattoo, you're very likely to get a second and third one. And so you should know that, and yeah, going into it. All right, last silly get to know you question. If you had to get a tattoo, what would you get and where?
Or
And no, this is actually a precursor.
Okay.
You can start with what you would definitely not get and where you would definitely not get it because you saw it once and it was terrible.
Okay. Worst tattoo ever is a guy who used to live near my apartment complex. I've seen him I saw him twice. I haven't seen him in like a long time, but the first time I saw him he was bald and he had the silhouette of a naked woman on the back of his head that went from the top of his head all the way until like his fourth vertebrae.
wow.
And the next time I saw him, he had grown his hair out, and you could only see the bottom half of a naked silhouetted woman.
Oh no.
And I was like, that not only is that the word like a terrible tattoo, but it's also a tattoo you can't cover up by growing out your hair because it like if you're gonna get that one, at least get it in a place where like you can cover up all of it.
Right.
Yeah,
But-
where the whole silhouette was up on your
yeah.
head.
He was working on a mullet.
Yeah, I was like so confused. I was like, what is going on here? Like
Wow.
it was weird.
I'll say the worst one I saw, and it's not that bad, but the lady was so ashamed of it. She got a clown tattoo on her ankle when she was like 18 because she always wanted a tattoo, and she just went and like picked one from a book when she was 18, and she was like, I was so stupid. And it was all, like smudgy and faded because she was in her like late 40s and she had never gotten it touched up or anything, but she was just like, why? Because there was no meaning for her.
Yeah.
It was just
a
something
clown.
that she went and got because she wanted to get a tattoo, and it was in the book.
It's what you did when you turned 18.
Yeah, clowning around. But if I had to get a tattoo, I would probably get some kind of flowers on my back so I don't have to see it all the time.
Like huge, like your whole back,
No.
or just a small portion of your back.
I think it would be medium size. Not tiny,
Yeah.
but not ginormous. Somewhere in the medium range. But I think I would get annoyed, or I think it would be less special to me if I saw it all the time
Sure.
than if I could be like, I'm gonna look at my tattoo now. I don't know. So if it was like on somewhere where I see all the time, I think I would appreciate it less.
Yeah. Yeah. Random question. What's the third letter in the Hebrew alphabet? Is it Dalet?
Aleph, Bet, Gimel, right?
Gimel? The Bet, Gimel, Dalet. Yeah, Dalet's third or fourth. So,
Yeah.
Gotcha. I'd probably do Bet, Gimel, Bet.
Okay, why?
There's a reason. I'd probably do that, or I'd probably do a different. Probably do a Hebrew word because I think the Hebrew calligraphy looks really cool. I know a friend of mine, Mason, got the word Hevel, which is the word for mist or smoke.
It's in Ecclesiastes quite a bit.
Yeah, but it's like I think Hebrew writing just looks really cool. So I don't know if I have like a specific word in mind, but I'd probably do one of those.
Where?
Forearm.
Forearm.
Easy
about you?
forearm.
This
Outside forearm.
outside forearm. Interesting.
Yeah.
I would get something that communicates like Christianity. So in college, I really wanted to do something that, and everything just seemed cliche. Like all the cool things I could think of,
With the Cairo.
everyone had. So like, yeah, just a cross is so cliche, and like to so many people, it doesn't mean what it should mean.
Yeah, some people it's just like a.
So maybe it's just
symbol.
like Jesus or something.
And where'd you put it?
I'd probably actually do forearm too, but
Outside
I think I'd do
forearm?
inner
Inside forearm?
Inner forearm, yeah.
All right. Let's pray.
Let me pray for us. God, I pray that as we have considered this question and we face other questions in our life circumstances and decisions and even the ability to speak truth to others and counsel others who come to any of us listening for help, would you give us the wisdom we need? Would you bring to mind scriptural truths in those moments? And would you help us to become people who consistently go to your word first and submit to what it says, and also are growing in wisdom and discernment and a desire to honor you with our lives and how we interact with others. We ask these things in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.